In today's episode, we're going to see all the details about sewing buttonholes and even sewing buttons. With all my tips and tricks, this is something that you do pretty often, so it's going to be helpful. Stay with me. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing. Welcome back to my sewing room. I am back home in my space with all my resources and my time, my fabric, my machines recently serviced, so they're ready to rock after a short little hiatus while I was visiting my family in my home country, Chile. We are back in business and we are hitting the ground running. I have a really cool sewing technique video for you, and I was about to sew some buttonholes and buttons onto a shirt that I'm making. I was gonna do that off camera like I usually do, and I realized I've never filmed this. I have a sneaky thought at the back of my mind that buttonholes and buttons can be super boring, but it's something that's pretty frequent to see in garments. It's something I hear online, a lot of chatter about being scared of them, that it's something that you might avoid, that you might like a pattern, but just because there's a buttonhole there, you might not actually sew it. I've heard that for years, and here I am to show you a simple way to do it. I'm not using special tools. You don't have to go out there and buy things. You can just use the simple things that you already have. And this is going to be very practical. I'm sure it's going to be helpful if you've been avoiding these buttonholes and buttons. It's just a closure method like others. There's zippers, there's other ways to get into garments, but I think this is the most accessible. It can be super fast once you get used to doing it. And it's just a functional part of garments that you'll see on front of a blouse, a shirt, a jacket, a coat, a little round thing that holds that garment together in that place into a buttonhole, which is actually just a hole. And the edges of that little cut of the fabric is finished with little tiny zigzags, of course, automated by our sewing machines. They used to be done by hand, my mom used to do them by hand back in the 60s, in the 70s. So she remembers doing that really well when machines just basically had a straight stitch. So we've come a long way. It is easier than it used to be in the past. In between this wonderful buttonhole content, I'm going to plug in here the Feature Friday pattern for today at Love Notions, and it's a Terra tunic. Here is the line art so you can see it. This is a knit garment. It's meant to be a tunic. I've only made one out of my 3 versions a tunic actually. It's still a little bit shorter than the original. This is the first one I made back in 2020, and it's a longer length. I've got it paired with a slightly A-line Allegro denim skirt. I think they match beautifully. I would not wear such a longer top with a fuller skirt or wide leg pants. So I think this is good. It's short sleeves, more versatile for me, but you can make it long sleeves as well. Bit of a high-low going on, not that much difference between the front and the back with a little slit here. Lots of neckline options, and I love this one. Has a collar that's asymmetric. It's very beautiful. You can put buttons if you want there. These are wonderful knit that looks like broderie and glaze, like those woven materials, but it's a knit, beautiful, love textured fabrics. And remember, with a Feature Friday at Love Notions, you get a pattern for $5, which is about 60% off the regular price, so it's an amazing deal. Ever since I made it the tunic length, I've been umming and ahhing about just making it shorter, and I've almost done it many times, and maybe I will eventually. Know that if you make something that's a little longer than what you feel comfortable with, you can always just cut it and hem it again. I'll even do the little slits again, but it's been a couple of years. I still have it the original length, so give it a go. Let me show you my second one, which has the same type of neckline. It's just shorter and a different color. This is the second Terra tunic I made in 2022. This one's a lot shorter. It's actually at my mid-hip, which is usually where I want tops to be. I kept the slits there, but I evened out the hem on the front and the back so that it's the same like that. I've got it paired with my A-line Allegro skirt in denim. Very basic, very neutral, with a bit more excitement down at the shoes with these flat loafers in red. Love that. So this is another embroidered knit, the same as the black one you just saw. It's gorgeous. Love textured fabrics when I use a solid. I've got the same beautiful neckline that's super easy to sew. Slightly overlapped over here, so you get part of it on the back, part of it on the front. Super pretty. I don't think it's really hot. It doesn't touch my neck, so I'm pretty comfortable. This one is sleeveless, and that's not an official option of the pattern, but you can always do that. I've done that by adding some armbands and making the shoulders a little narrower over here. So this one's super versatile at this length. I can tuck it in. I can do a tuck on the side. It's not bulky inside the garment I put it into. I love this one. The next one is the only one geared for colder weather. This is my third Terra tunic, this time for cooler weather. Beautiful sweater knit. I did cut it on the bias just for the aesthetics of it. I did cut the sleeves normal though, and I think it looks really cool. Again, it's another shorter one. It's not a tunic, it's just a top. I always keep the side slits there because I like doing that. Different neckline here. It's more of a boat neck. Still very comfortable, it's not too high. It's finished with a facing on the inside that I interface, tricot knee interfacing. It's top stitched down so it doesn't move. And over here on the shoulders we have a overlap here with buttons. Super cute feature, I love that. And there's so many other neckline options as well. Don't forget to grab your Terra tunic today for only $5. What side do they go? For women's wear, it's on the right side of your body. So the placket that's worn on the right side of your chest, that's where the buttonholes would go, and the buttons would be sewn onto the left side. And for men's wear, it's just the inverse. Now, I've been known to do this the other way around when I thrift men's wear and then I transform it into something that fits me with darts and whatnot. I don't really care if I'm walking around the street with this inversed. I don't really care. But if I'm sewing from scratch, I'm going to do it the traditional way on the right side. It's easy to remember. Now, one thing I'm going to say, and I think it's one of the most important things that have got to do with a good result with a buttonhole, is to have interfacing in the area. If you don't have any interfacing in the area, your fabric is not that stable, and all that stitching in that one place is not going to turn out too stable. It's going to be harder even to do and harder to cut, easier to make mistakes when you're cutting through it because the fabric is not too stable. And this is even more with knit styles that have a button placket. If a jacket has an opening or a separate button placket, you know, you want to be able to have that interfacing there. That is super mega important. Now, sometimes on the front of a garment, you have a whole separate piece that you interface first, and that becomes your button placket. That could be true for a jacket, for a blouse, for a shirt. Other times it's just part of the front that's extended. It's a little wider. You interface that center area and then you fold it in. In either case, you have an area in the front where your buttonholes are going to go, where it is interfaced. Here you see me cutting out a button placket on a knit garment. This is a sweater knit, very, very flimsy, very lightweight. I decided to use tricot knit interfacing to give it that little bit of flexibility because it is a knit garment after all, but I do want that stability there to be able to do the buttonholes later. This is the recently released Evanston vest from Love Notions. Here it is up closer. All of this area is a separate piece that I interfaced using block fusing. If you want to know what block fusing is, I have a whole video talking about why I do that, and I live by block fusing every single garment I make. No different here. And here are the very nice stable buttonholes and buttons. It turns out really nice. I would not have been able to make these buttonholes in a nice way if this was not interfaced. This would have been stretching as I go. Buttonholes would end up stretching out, your buttons just popping open for no good reason. So super important. Now, if you've been sewing for a while or you've been purchasing clothes for yourself, you're going to see that there's two positions where these buttonholes can go. They can go vertical or they can go horizontal. Now, I would say horizontal buttons tend to be stronger, and you would usually find them on the top of waistbands. So check out these jeans I made. These are the Dawn jeans by Megan Nielsen I made a couple of years ago. And you have a horizontal buttonhole on the top. This one, when you put the button, it'll stop right there at the start of the buttonhole and it'll be super, super firm. Now, I don't think these are aesthetically pleasing if you want to put them along the front of a jacket or along the front of a blouse. That's why you would rarely see them like that. I have seen them in some sportswear where there's only maybe 3 buttons across the whole of a front of a jacket. I still don't like them, but that's just personal preference. You know, you can do that if you want to. Where I think a horizontal button is very, very appropriate is on cuffs. You might just have 1 or 2. Those are usually horizontal. They're going to be firmer. They're discreet. Sometimes you might find mixed buttonholes, like in this jacket. On the top part of the neckband and the hemband, we have horizontal buttons. They would not fit vertically anyway because it's a smaller area. So in that case, you would have horizontal buttons on the top and the bottom, but then along the placket, all the buttonholes would be vertical, and that's what I did with that one. I'm generally in favor of vertical buttonholes along a long placket, but definitely on a blouse or a shirt where you can have like 10 buttonholes, I would not do it like that. I would just keep them vertical. This is one of my Aria shirts from Love Notions. There you can clearly see 2 little buttonholes going down vertically. these vertical buttonholes are still very stable, they're still functional, they're still going to keep your garment closed. And there's little tricks to even improve that, which we're going to see as we go along this episode. You know, you always have the power to choose. I would say for tops of waistbands, do them horizontal like this. This is functional. It's only one, you know, that's fine. But for anywhere, for any garment where you need a whole bunch of them down the front where it's going to be super visible, the more aesthetically pleasing option would be the vertical option. Another aspect to talk about today is where they go. When you're looking at your patterns, you might find buttonhole suggestion marks on your pattern. And sometimes it doesn't say it's a suggestion. It just says template for buttonholes and buttons. And you might take that as you have to make the buttonholes where the pattern is telling you. But just let me tell you right now that it's mostly not going to work. You do really want to have a buttonhole on your bust height, and that's so variable, and your bust height will probably not match the bust height of the pattern. You know, your bust height might be higher or lower than what is marked there. You might end up with a button on the wrong place, and let me show you an example of that. Very classic. This is ready to wear. This is why this is happening to me, because obviously when you buy something, you can't choose where the buttonholes go. They just are there. So let's see. Here we have a classic example of where buttonholes have nothing to do with my body and they are not entirely functional. This was a ready-to-wear shirt I thrifted. It had sleeves. I reshaped it to fit me. It's amazing. Fabric was so good. It was worth thrifting and reshaping to fit. So let's see these buttons. You can see the first thing that I'm not happy with is how much distance there is between them. And the other thing is over here. Now here is my bust height right there. And look where these buttons are. There's one below, there's one above. And so no matter what I do, I'm going to get this situation. And this is actually why I have a safety pin right there. Because up to now for wearing it, I have to pin it from the other side and secure it so I can feel safe and it's okay. I have thought about adding extra buttonholes in between, but then they would become super, super close together. Like they would be like 1.5 inches apart. So that's why I haven't done that. And to be able to wear it, I'm just using the safety pin. But this is ready to wear. I had no way to regulate where these were going to be. They were already there. I love it. I always wear this, and the safety pin is the solution. But if I'm going to be sewing, I want a buttonhole to be right there. And then I'll regulate the rest, and then I'm going to feel safe that this is not going to gape. Let's just have a quick check at what the distance between these buttonholes are. Look, it's basically 4 inches. That is so much. I mean, over here, you can see part of my tummy maybe. Over here, part of my tummy. It's just too much space. I just don't like this. So this can definitely be improved. If you're sewing, put them closer together. Make sure that one is actually at your bust height, and it's going to be so much better than one. And I'm talking about ready to wear, but you can get the same situation happen if you just follow the marks on your pattern. It might not match where your bust point is. You just might want more of them, be closer together. So it's always customizable, and that's why we sew.
Let's see a clip of me showing you a pattern where they are, how I'm marking that onto my finished shirt, because this is one of the last steps that you do, and seeing if this is actually going to be okay for me. But let me just show you how that would look on a pattern.
This is the front bodice piece for this blouse that I'm using, and there are suggested buttonhole locations marks right there with those crosses. I like the wording that it just says suggested buttonhole locations. It means that it's just a suggestion, which it always is, but I think some people take this as the law. So I have gone ahead and marked those on my actual garment right there according to the marks, so that we can see where that actually lands on my body. Most of the time it's not correct. Most of the time my bust height is somewhere lower, and that means I would have gaping happening right there. So just take them as suggestion. I'm going to see how these actually fit, and then I'm going to customize to myself. Now I've put these little pins on there to see how it's going to go. There's a certain distance there that I measured for this pattern, which I think is good. It's 2 3/8 or 6 centimeters. I think that's an okay distance between buttonholes, but I always want to see that on my body. Now the crucial reference is the bust height. You're going to see me try this on and see where that relates to the buttonhole marks on the actual pattern, and see where we go from there. You need a buttonhole at your bust height. That's where you're going to have the most tension. And even if you have a garment with an X amount of ease, super comfortable, if the buttonholes are not correctly placed, you're going to have that annoying gaping that we do not want to have. And this is something that you can definitely customize and get the perfect fit just for you. That's why you're taking the time to sew for yourself. So it's something to pay attention to, and not just blindly trust that the marks on the pattern are going to work for you, because They might not, they probably won't. Okay, here we are. I've got my shirt on. I've got it crossed over like it should be. And here we have the first buttonhole mark. It actually does match my bust height right there very well. So I think that's good. Then the bottom ones are going to be okay too. But if this is just going to be the first buttonhole ever, I think this is way too low. You know, if I want to wear this on its own, you know, there's a risk of me showing some cleavage. So I definitely want to put one up higher right there to be more comfortable. So let's say this one is okay. I'm going to keep that location. I'm going to add another one up higher. I still haven't determined what distance I want for these buttonholes to be at. I'm going to take this as a reference. I really want that one there. If you see the bust dart comes here, this is my bust height. It's right there. I want to have a button right there. So for this pattern, magically it does match. But for others, you might find your buttons here and there where the bust height would be right in the middle of two buttons, and then you would have gaping no matter what. Even if you have enough ease, there's always going to be some gaping. So you see when I tried on my garment that actually the bust height mark was correct in this pattern. Now I'm just going to preface that this pattern has bust cup sizes and a bust dart that I did not have to lower. So the chances of that buttonhole being placed correctly were pretty high, but you still need to confirm it on the body. But then you also saw that I did not want to show all that cleavage because that first buttonhole is still too low for me. I still wanted one higher. And that's something that's got to do with your preference and how much chest area here, your skin, you like to expose. So there's a certain point that it can go low enough when you can't see anything. But definitely that buttonhole there up higher needed to be there, and I'm always happy to customize and tweak. Now, what type of thread are you going to use? Keep it simple. Use the thread you're using to sew your garment. Usually it's going to match whatever you're sewing. I try to find the nicest one that's going to blend in the most. I typically don't see buttonholes as decorative or something really nice that you want to highlight. That's at least how I see it. And I rarely will do contrast top stitching for the same reason if I'm working on a solid color. The only exception would be jeans, and even with jeans, I keep it really, really discreet. For these Dawn jeans, I use the same top stitching thread I used on the waistband and everywhere else to do my buttonhole, so you can definitely use top stitching thread, and then just keep your regular thread at the back on the bobbin. So that is the same color, which is very discreet. It's not too contrasty. I have used golden thread with denim in the past in some garments, but I usually tend to keep the top stitching as close to the color of the garment as I can. So polyester thread all purpose, it's going to work. Top stitching thread is going to work. Now, if you want a buttonhole that looks a bit fuller, more fuzzy, you can use cotton thread. I don't have a good result with cotton thread. Usually it breaks on my needle. It's just not very long lasting, but you can use it if you want to and it works for you. What I'm going to be showing you is how to do them with an automatic buttonhole maker, which is something that is a feature of many modern machines right now. In the past, I used to use another press-a-foot, which has a 3-step function, which you have to change, and it's not that complicated. I think most of you have access to a machine where you just put your settings on your machine, and I use a buttonhole press-a-foot that will just do it in one go. All you do is press the button. Now, there's one thing you can do, because you're going to get settings there on your machine that are pretty standard. If you want a fuller look of that buttonhole and just more thread there, you can shorten the stitch length if you want to. That's something I never do. The settings that I get on my machine are pretty much always the same. I never change them, and I'm pretty happy with the result. So let's see the most practical bits, how I'm marking these, how I'm distancing them, how I'm making my marks on the fabric, which is super important, how I'm getting the buttons to all end up in the same distance from the edge of the garment, and cutting them, stabilizing them, all those things. Let's see. These are my matching buttons. I'm partial to buttons with only 2 openings. I like them best. They're easier to sew on. They look aesthetically pleasing. So that's what I always try to choose, especially for shirts. This is a 5/8 inch button, which I think is a nice size. I go for 1/2 inch to 5/8. Only for blazers, I would use bigger buttons. So this is a nice size. That's how they're going to look. I think that's really nice. I'm going to show you my process, just exactly how I do it every single time. Any garment you see, it's the same thing. This is my bust height right there. That is one location that's not going to move. That is going to be there fixed. And now I determined that I want to have 6 centimeters between them, which is 2 3/8. I love metric, especially for things like this. It's just so easy. I just do it with a tape. I don't use any special marking tools, keeping it super simple. So I'm just going to mark that right there, 6, and then mark the one on the top, and I'm just going to do it with a friction pen. Friction pen works really well with linen, and then it'll come right off. And then 6, 12, 18, and I'm marking the top of the buttonhole right here, 24, 30. I think that's enough. There's a bodice seam. I would not want to do a button over that because that's super bulky and it would look horrendous. Trying to cut through it would just look horrific. So my button's going to be slightly above that one. That's okay. It's not going to gape right there. I don't think the waist is a place of high tension like the bust is. So don't think you have to put a buttonhole right at that seam. That does not usually work. So I have my lines like this that I just drew, and that's going to mark the top of my buttonhole. So my buttonhole is going to start there and then go down like that. That's how it's going to go. And the button is actually going to be sewn on close to the top end of each buttonhole just to keep it safer. So simple, 1 mark per buttonhole. I'm not going to mark 2, like start the buttonhole here, finish it there. Start it there, finish it there. I'm not doing that. Too much and totally unnecessary. The other thing I want to mark now so that they're all centered and in the right position is the distance from the edge right here. From the edge up to the button, I want about 1/2 inch. And up to the middle of that button, I have about 3/4. So 3/4 inches here, I'm going to mark there. Look, I wish I had a better marking tool that marked this in like yellow or white or something, but I don't want those marks to stay. So I'm just making a little cross on each of these so that they all come out at the same place. Super easy. You don't need to mark a line all the way down. That's just too much. Remember, we're trying to get a good result, but keeping it relatively simple, simple tools, no extra gadgets. If you want the gadgets, go ahead. I'm just showing you what I do, and I always get a beautiful result without much fuss. So I know exactly now where my buttonholes are going to start. And for this particular shirt, I'm going to have 6. Okay, here are the little crosses that I have. This is where I'm going to center my buttonhole exactly on that line and that line. And that's how I'm going to get a buttonhole that's the same distance from the edge this way, vertically. So parallel to the edge. Every single one's going to be the same. And I usually start from the top going down closer to the hem. If I can show you in here, right there where I'm pointing out with my seam ripper is the middle. That is the middle there of the buttonhole, and that's where I'm going to mark on the middle of that little cross that I drew. So it's important that you can see your markings. I can see them, and I'm going to place this right there. Now, once you can see the distance that your fabric has from the edge right there, that's helpful as well. So I'm almost at the edge of that mark on the metal plate. So I'm going to make sure my needle goes right down in the center of that cross. There. And now I'm happy, and I can start this first one and press the pedal. So there's a gorgeous buttonhole, and then comes the next one. My needle goes right in the middle of that cross there. I have the exact same distance everywhere.
I like to cut all my threads as I go. In essence, you could keep going and then cut between them afterwards, but I find that so messy to look at.
I'm never in a rush to cut these open right away. So before doing that, I've turned this to the wrong side, and I'm going to put a tiny bit of fray check over here along the buttonhole. Nothing worse than a buttonhole coming apart later on and having holes. It's not something you can easily repair. So I'm just going to put a little bit here, not overdoing it, keeping it within the buttonhole. This will not show. You'll never know that this is there. And I'm just going to wait a while for this to dry up. And then it makes it easier to cut through it, because once this is all dry, it's going to be super crispy and easy to work with. Okay, time has passed. All that fray check is totally dry. It's actually super crunchy now and firm right there. Now, I don't use one of those blades or anything. I keep it simple with my seam ripper. I just do it carefully. So above from that horizontal stitch there, I'm just going to poke this in and just do it nice and gently. You don't want to go boom and then just cut through everything. So that's nicely done, and it's so easy. This is not a source of stress at all. I've never had a problem with cutting out too much. Just have a soft hand and do it. And this freight check is going to make it so much nicer to do anyway, because it feels like you're cutting through paper or cardboard. It's that simple. Now you saw on the screen, I put little tables of information here, which would vary with the button size. I chose medium-sized buttons for this example, 5/8 of an inch buttons. I typically use 1/2 an inch buttons. For a garment that's delicate, light, like made out of lightweight rayon or silk, I would probably use buttons that are smaller, 3/8 of an inch. And then the measurements that you use, the distance from the edge would be a little bit smaller. Take the reference marks on your pattern also as a guide, because they're going to have a distance from the edge as well that you can follow. And then what you can customize is the distance between them. Now, in my personal preference, my sewing experience, I find that I feel safer and I have less gaping and issues when I have more buttons than less buttons. Most of the dresses I sew, shirt dresses, whatever, it always says, you need 6 buttons. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'll probably need about 9. Blazer, you need 3. And I'm like, I'm probably going to need 4 or 5, because I just like more buttonholes and more buttons. 2 to 2.5 inch difference between them is what I like. I like a lot of buttons and I like them about 2 inches apart. So if you measure there, 1, that one starts on 2, the next one starts at 4, the next one starts at 6, and so on and so forth. It'll vary between the garment. It even varies when I don't have enough buttons. I might go a little bit more. So it all depends. Just take that as my suggestion. Sometimes you'll find patterns that there's a 3 or 4 inch difference for a shirt, and I think that's just way too much distance. You're gonna see my skin here, my stomach area. I just don't like that. Now for a blazer or something that's just outerwear where you're gonna be wearing a garment underneath, I don't really mind about that. I'll do 4 inch difference, 4 centimeters, whatever is in the pattern. I'm probably gonna be happy with, because I'm not just going to be wearing my bra and my skin underneath the garment. So it all depends on those things. Have a think about those aspects before you go and decide the distance that you want. But as a rule of thumb for me, if I'm only wearing my skin and my bra underneath, I want a lot of buttons. If it's a jacket or a coat, then I'm okay with a larger distance, as long as the crucial buttonhole is at my bust height. That has to be there for any type of garment that I'm sewing. That needs to be. Now, believe it or not, I have filmed how to sew a button. Yay. You know, keep it simple. I'm not using complicated language here. There's 2 openings on my button, which are usually my favorite ones to buy, because it just keeps it simple and it just looks nicer in my opinion. Sometimes I use buttons with 4 openings, rarely though. I'd rather just have 2. But let's see how I'm sewing them, how to get them firm and bulk free and not too tight. So let's see. Okay, here's my garment. Here is the right side going over the left side is worn. Buttonholes are on the right side, typically for us. So I'm just going to align the waist seam right there, align here at the bottom, the hem. It's all very nice and smooth. And I keep it super simple. I just mark where I'm going to sew my buttons with just regular pins. I said I was going to put my pins a little below this. What I want is for my button to end up looking like this, so that part of the button is actually overlapping over the top part of the buttonhole, and that just keeps it a little more secure rather than putting it right in the middle of the buttonhole. It's not much of a difference in the distance here, but it will make a difference in the functionality. So I'm just going to push it that way a little bit, and I'm just going to put a pin right here to see what that distance is. It's about 1/4 of an inch below the start of each buttonhole. So that's where I'm going to poke a pin through there, over here, and I do it all in one go. I don't do it as I go. I think if you just mark them from the get-go, there's less chance of error. Now I'm just going to confirm the distance is 3/4 of an inch here, and if there's any discrepancy, I'm going to fix it. Sometimes it's off by a little bit. So there I know exactly where all my buttons are going to go sewn on. Super simple. Now I don't think I've ever filmed myself sewing on a button, but here we go. Now here's the button. Now some people like to start sewing from underneath and keep that first knot down there, but I'm going to do it the other way just to reduce the bulk on the other side. So I'm going to poke through the front and have the knot appear right here. And it's going to be hidden by the button anyway, so I'm not concerned. And then I'm going to bring my needle up again and put it through the first button. These are my preferred buttons, only 2 openings. It's so much easier. And I'll go over it a couple of times just to make it secure. I want to make sure it doesn't move while I'm sewing. And I also don't want to sew it on super extra tight. I want there to be a tiny little bit of wiggle room while keeping it firm. So look at this. It can still move with us a little bit. And that's how it's going to end up being much more functional and comfortable. Regular thread, regular needle, nothing fancy over here. And then at the back, I'm going to do a knot. So I'm going to end up just having knots here just for the ending of this. I'm not going to have the knot from when this started, which reduces bulk. Sometimes your garments fly open, you can sort of see this, and I just want to keep it as bulk free as possible. That's why I like to hide the first knot under here when no one's ever going to see it. So it's easy, it's just a single loop, put the needle through, knot it, do it twice or 3 times if you want. And it's a very nice, neat finish. And there is a button that's not too tight, not too loose, can still move around, and it's going to fit my buttonhole perfect. So I'm just going to keep going up. The garment I was sewing the buttonholes and buttons onto is a garment you'll see very soon. I'm preparing a video all about it. It's a very nice shirt. So I'm not going to say what pattern it is or that. That doesn't matter for this tutorial. All you needed to see was what I was doing with these buttonholes and buttons, and I hope this helped you. Please leave me your experiences down below with buttonholes. Tell me how you feel about them. I've told you how I feel about them. I love doing them. I have no issues doing them. With a little caveat though, if I feel that the garment is okay and it's loose and I don't plan to wear it open as a layering piece, I'm very happy to sew the button placket, everything, interface it, the whole thing. And then I'm just going to sew buttons right through and not have buttonholes. And that makes it just for the look. If they're non-functional, I will be happy to do that. And I've done that with a few of my garments. But if I'm going to do it functional, I don't mind doing 20 buttonholes. Just take a chunk of your time out for that, because you're almost at the end of the project and it's something that you usually think is going to take less time than you think, when it usually takes a little longer if you want the result to be super nice, pleasing, or nice and straight and smooth, evenly distanced, nice secure buttons that are not going to fall out because you didn't do too many stitching in there. Just give this last part of your garment the time it deserves and you're going to be super satisfied. That's all from me, and I'll see you very soon with more sewing content here over at Lifting Pins and Needles. Bye.